Well, the church in Albania goes back to the apostolic period. In Durrës, we have the tradition of the visit of St. Paul, and that the apostle Caesarius was the first bishop of the city, and St. Asti, the martyr, after him. So there's a long history of the Orthodox Church in Albania. However, this history was to some extent interrupted by the Turkish conquest of the Balkans. So around 1500, the Turks took over. A lot of churches, monasteries, schools were destroyed in the initial 100 years or more of the conquest. So there was a break. The church then did continue. So in the 1700s, churches were, in 1800s, churches were being built under the Turkish Ottoman government, and things were somewhat stable. But the number of Orthodox was declining as people were converting to avoid persecution. Then, so by World War I, only about 20% of the population was Orthodox. The majority were Muslim, and then we also had a Catholic minority due to the Fourth Crusade and the Venetian occupation of the coastal cities, including Durrës, where we live. Now, during the World War II, as the Germans were defeated and the Italians were defeated, Russia moved into Eastern Europe, and this included Albania. So the communists took over the government there. And there was some persecution of the church, but not a total persecution. But when the Russians wanted to replace the dictator of Albania, the Albanian dictator chose to go under the protection of the Chinese government, Mao Zedong. And Albania became more isolated. But then in 1967, when the Cultural Revolution occurred in China, the Albanian government decided to implement this by eliminating all religion from Albania, which was included not just the Orthodox, but the Roman Catholic and the Islamic religions. So during that time, a lot of Orthodox churches were destroyed, including the monastery of St. Vlach, where the seminary where we live that was where that was located, was destroyed. Many of the other buildings were taken over for other uses, in which case they partially survived. Sometimes they were just badly damaged, and the people were forbidden to go to those places, sort of the rural areas mostly. So not only were services forbidden, but the private practice of religion in the home was also forbidden. So outwardly, it appeared that Orthodoxy and religion in general had been eliminated from Albanian life. But in 1991, when communism fell in Eastern Europe in general, and also in Albania, Archbishop Anastasios, who had been a bishop in East Africa, was sent to kind of visit Albania to see if there was anything left from which a church could be rebuilt. And it turned out that many of the people were still believers, but secretly up to this point, and were now anxious to have the church restored. So Archbishop Anastasios at that time was made archbishop and began the work of trying to reconstruct the church. So partly this was, finding the believers, and there were few elderly clergy left to try to begin having services again. And then the other part was trying to get buildings back. So if there were buildings that had been put to other uses, to buy those back from the government, to repair damage to buildings so that they could be used, or in many cases where in buildings in rural areas, the damage, especially to the roofs, would lead ultimately to the destruction of all of the artwork inside. So that that was kind of important from time-wise, because if rain gets into the inside of a church, the frescoes are damaged, and so he wanted to get roofs on those to preserve what there was of the buildings. But in Tirana, the original cathedral was destroyed, and I guess the bank was built on top of it, but there was one church that would convert it into a gymnasium, so he was able to repurchase that, and that became the new cathedral. There was another church in Tirana that was made into a restaurant, and after some years, they were able to have that, be able to purchase that back to be able to make a church there as well. But in Durrës, where we live, the cathedral was destroyed, and the police headquarters was put on top of it, but some land was reclaimed from a marshy area of the bay, and that was given or sold to the church to be allowed for the use of building a new cathedral, which is there. So the cathedral in Durrës is on reclaimed land. There's also a church there that also had been turned into a restaurant, St. George's up on the hill, and that was restored to the church also. But so around the country, the Archbishop had a lot of work to do. I mean, so actually a huge project in trying to restore church buildings and preserve what was left of the architectural and cultural inheritance of the church in Albania. But then the other thing was to try to provide clergy that would be able to allow church communities to be reestablished. So this he did by founding a seminary. Initially it met in Durrës, but then later it moved to the monastery of Saint Blas, or St. Blaise, which is on a hill just behind Durrës, coming from the coast. And that's where the seminary is today. So there was emphasis first on training priests so that there could be liturgies again in the different villages and cities around the country. But then after a while, the emphasis, let's say, shifted more to training people for working with children, and teaching children about the faith, and also working with young people, university-age students. This is now, so as the age of the students coming in became younger, that became more of the focus, because like the current students tend to be college-age students, and they're too young to be ordained. So they work in the church for a while, and then after some time they're able to be ordained later. But this gives them a chance to be working for the church for some years before they would be considered for ordination. The Archbishop also wanted to provide institutions that would help the church. Well, part of this was an episcopate, so as people converted, there were some bishops who were brought from Greece. So two of our older bishops in the south part of Albania are from that category. And then the other thing was to train new people. So among people who were converting in the 90s, some of them were sent on after seminary to Greece to study, and some of these became bishops. So we have now a number of young Albanian bishops of different backgrounds. Some of these are because although the Orthodox community, which was 20% of the country, that was suppressed, and the Archbishop was trying to bring that back, to bring church life back to them. His vision wasn't just to restore, let's say, a kind of ethnic church, but he had the idea of making the gospel available to everyone who would want it. So that included everybody in Albania, not just people of historic Orthodox background. So some of our bishops are also from Muslim backgrounds as well. But the other thing was to establish schools. So there are church preschools, elementary schools, and high schools that are in traditionally Orthodox areas around the country, as well as we have a high school we had a church high school up near Doris, but that's actually closed now. And then there's a sort of kindergarten to 12th grade school in Tirana as well, which is very large, private school that's run by the church. But there are, I think, about over 30 schools that the Archbishop has founded. And other institutions, was the say social ministries, the educational ministries for children, youth ministries, things that would introduce people to the church, but also economically to help people in Albania. So sometimes roads and water systems, things that, because the difficulty there was that some of the villages were very remote, so people there felt that it was difficult to sell things from there, and there was the temptation for young people to leave the villages, which has happened. But by improving life in the villages, he hoped to kind of make it possible for these villages to survive and, in a way, maintain an Orthodox population and culture in the country. Also he founded the university, Logos University, which was really a professional training school in Tirana. It had faculty of business and faculty of medicine, informatics. So that school now is what the seminary, in its sort of wanting to be accredited, the government allowed accreditation this year, but not as an independent school, but as a department of the university. So the university was created with the idea of providing opportunities for people in Albania to have better jobs and better life, but it's also now giving, a foundation in which the church's theological school could be recognized by the government, and we could be able to hopefully have a master's program as well.